All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a pretty heavy idea from the 18th century, from a theologian named Thomas Boston. And it's all about this concept he calls utter inability. So get this. What if, deep down in our very nature, we are completely and totally powerless to save ourselves?
And this whole line of thinking really kicks off with this one biblical verse. Pay attention to that phrase, without strength. In this argument, that's not just a suggestion that we're a little bit weak. No, it's the absolute core of the problem. The idea that we are fundamentally and completely helpless.
So to really get our heads around this, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. First, we'll lay out the core problem. Then we'll look at the 2 supposed escape routes, works and grace. After that, we'll tackle the objections, because let's be honest, there are definitely going to be some. And finally, we'll get to the author's really surprising answer to the big question. So, what now?
Okay, first up, the predicament. The whole argument starts with this really powerful image. Picture this. All of humanity is trapped at the bottom of a deep, dark pit. A pit of sin and misery. And the most important part, we are completely unable to get out on our own. This idea of being dead in the pit is meant to be taken seriously. It's not about being weak or just struggling to climb. The argument is that we are spiritually, well, inanimate. We have zero capacity to even begin our own rescue. So if you're stuck in this pit, you might think you have 2 basic options. You could try to claw your way out on your own, that's the path of works, or you could just grab a rope that someone throws down to you. That's the path of grace. But here's the twist. The author argues that if left to our own devices, both of these are totally impossible. Let's dig into that first option then. The path of trying to earn your salvation through perfect actions. The path of works. The author sets the bar incredibly high here. If you want to save yourself this way, the standard isn't just doing your best or being a pretty good person. The standard is nothing less than absolute, flawless, 100% perfection. And to show just how high that bar is, the text breaks perfection down into 3 parts. It's not just about what you do. Your inner motives have to be perfectly pure. You have to obey every single rule without ever failing. And you have to do it all with everything you've got all of the time. Easy, right? So you see this huge mismatch. On one side, you have the law's absolute demand for perfection, and on the other, you have what the author sees as our reality, an impure nature where even a single bad thought is enough to fail the entire test. And you know, the problem goes even deeper. The text argues that even if, by some miracle, you could be perfect from this moment on, you've still got this massive, unpayable debt from all your past mistakes. Fulfilling today's duty doesn't just erase yesterday's failures. The author wraps up this point with this really dramatic, almost cinematic image. The idea is that the path of works isn't just hard or impractical. According to this argument, it is actively, divinely barred. There is no getting in this way. Okay, so if we can't save ourselves through perfect works, what about that other option? What about just accepting the help that's offered through grace? That sounds a whole lot easier, doesn't it? And that brings us to the key question. If salvation is like a lifeline thrown to someone who's drowning, why in the world can't they just grab it? And here is the core of the answer according to this view. Our very nature is the problem. We are literally incapable of even wanting or seeing the help that's offered. The text says we're spiritually blind, we have a stony heart, and our will is naturally opposed to the very thing that would save us. We are powerless to move toward it unless some divine power first moves us. This metaphor really drives the point home, doesn't it? The problem isn't that the food, or the lifeline, isn't available. In this view, the problem is our total inability to make use of it. We're helpless not because help is missing, but because we don't have the capacity to accept it.
Now, an argument this absolute is bound to raise some eyebrows. And the author knew this, so in this next section, he takes on those doubts head-on.
So here's the first major objection, and it's a big one. If we are truly unable to do good, how can God fairly require it of us? It's a fundamental question of justice.
The author's response has a few layers. First, he argues that humanity had the power originally, but we lost it through our own fault. Second, he uses this analogy. A creditor doesn't lose his right to demand payment just because the debtor blew all the money. And third, he reframes the inability as something voluntary, a problem of the will. It's not a can't, it's a won't. The second objection is way more practical. If people are powerless to act, then what's the point of preaching at them? Why call people to repent and believe if they can't? It seems like you're just spinning your wheels. Well,
The text argues these calls serve a few different purposes, whether we can respond or not. First, it's a command from God, and duty is based on the command, not our ability. Second, these calls are the very means God uses to work in certain people. And finally, even for those who aren't converted, it can act as a kind of moral brake, keeping them from even greater wickedness. This all leads us to the final and maybe the most fascinating part of the whole argument. It's the practical takeaway of this doctrine of complete inability, which really just feels like a dead end.
The entire argument has been building to this massive paradox. If you are truly, utterly powerless to save yourself, then should you just do nothing? What is the logical next step?
And what's so surprising is that the conclusion isn't to do nothing. It's kind of the opposite. The advice is to do what you can. Use the natural abilities you do have. Go to a place where prayer is made. Listen. Think about what you've heard. Pray. The text compares it to the Israelites being told to march toward the Red Sea, a sea they couldn't possibly part, but they could walk toward it. You position yourself in the path of grace.
And so we end with this final, thought-provoking question that comes right out of the text's logic. Does recognizing your own total powerlessness just lead to despair? Or, as this author argues, is that very recognition of helplessness the necessary, maybe painful, but absolutely essential first step toward finding a completely different path to recovery?